Welcome to the Daily Objective. Growing up, the highlight of the week when I was around 7, 8 years old was Tuesday at around 7 o'clock, because then on the TV, there would be the weekly show of Knight Rider with David Hasselhoff driving his fabulous car, Kit. And another highlight was whenever the TV would show on a Sunday night, Sunday at night at 9, they would have a Hollywood blockbuster, usually from the 80s, because you would have this time lag between when you were allowed to show a film. And I would watch the trailer, because I was not allowed to watch the whole film. It was 9 o'clock, was too late. A trailer from the great 80s adventure films. Films like Rocky, Rambo, Top Gun, Schwarzenegger films. So these were the first hero archetypes that I got in my life. And I have to say, I'm very grateful that I got these archetypes. But this is not the only thing I want to talk about today about 80s films. Not only the personal context. Another context is, what were the portrayal of the morality of the United States and the sense of life of the United States and the sense of mission of the United States that these films portrayed? And a very superficial reading is that these films are silly Cold War propaganda. Okay, whatever. But also another reading is that these films were cherished actually behind the Iron Curtain. They were cherished in socialist countries, like in Romania, for example. There were underground clubs where they would have VHS tapes of Chuck Norris, for example, films. And there was someone who would do the voiceover in Romanian because they couldn't understand English. And these films played a role in these people developing a consciousness which says, our regime is actually bad, and there's a world out there based on values which are much better than ours, and we have to get rid of whatever we have here. And also there's this iconic moment when the Berlin Wall collapses and David Hasselhoff with a leather jacket which has some lights like a Christmas tree is singing on the Berlin Wall a song about freedom. So again, you can say all this is silly. I don't find them silly. I found them a nice sense of life, and that's why I'm here to discuss them. And with me today, Mark Pellegrino. So Mark, you are an actor, so probably your standards for these 80s films, for your artistic standards, would be way different than mine, and you might have a different view on them. But overall, when you hear 80s action films, so Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Top Gun, Chuck Norris, what's your first reaction? Is it cringe?
Well, I mean, you might think I would laugh cynically, but no, I think you're right. I think the 80s were a very interesting time. It's no mistake that Reagan was in office and was articulating a vision of America that we hadn't heard for a very long time. And I think that vision of America filled people in general with optimism. Now, I had voted against Reagan the first time I could vote. But nonetheless was affected by his sense of life, which permeated all of his speeches and really lifted America up in a way that people today would find quite strange. And that sense of life was reflected in the movies, in the men, and I might note women, who were heroes in that movies. Let's not forget Sarah Connor, the great hero Sarah Connor in Terminator was born there. And Ripley, of course, in the Alien franchise. Aliens came out in the 80s. And what they had in common were what all the characters like John McClane from Die Hard had in common. They were underdogs who had guts and intelligence and overcame overwhelming odds to win the day. Axel Foley too is a great example of I think a 80s action hero, Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop, who is a Detroit cop who comes to Beverly Hills and turns the whole place upside down to find the person who murdered his buddy. And all these folks were irreverent, they were independent, they were tough, and they got the job done, man. And it's sort of cool to go back and watch that. And some of these movies don't, some of the movies don't hold up, but some of them do. Beverly Hills Cop, I think, holds up today. I think people would find it as funny and entertaining and filled with value as they did back then. I think they would find the same with Aliens. And we can talk about a few more of them.
There is something individualistic in the ethos. So I will stick to the example of Knight Rider, but you could say this for any Cop series of the time. So usually it's an individual in a pursuit for justice, in a pursuit to avenge some evil that has been done. And by doing so, he's using his mind, he's using cool technology, he's dressed in a cool way, the music is cool. It's a cool sense of life. It's a place that you see it and you want to be there. You want to, it's a, whatever this guy is having, I want to be something like that, which is not necessarily the case today with the with the TV series. Something else which is different. There's a very clear cut between good and evil, which again, today you don't get that. There's no question that Michael Knight in Knight Rider is a good guy and everyone opposing him is a bad guy. There is no question in Delta Force, and actually I want to stay in Delta Force for a second. The plot of the film is that some Lebanese terrorists hijack a plane, and they particularly point out the Jews in the plane, and they want to kill them, and Delta Force shows up and destroys them. This film today would be unimaginable because of this clarity that, you know what, the terrorists are bad. There is no backstory. There is no, what happened in their village when they were young. Think about, for example, in comparison, think about Homeland, which is a great TV series. I love Homeland. In Homeland, you are not 100% sure, are we the good guys? Are the terrorists the bad guys? So quite often in Homeland, the terrorists lecture the CIA agents about what made them do that. And there's this moral ambiguity. In Delta Force, there is no moral ambiguity. Chuck Norris is a good guy. Also, there's product placement, which today you are not allowed. So he drinks his Pepsi, and then he's ready to kick ass. So again, would I watch today Knight Rider? Probably not. Do I still love Knight Rider? Absolutely, I love it. And the same thing with other Cold War movies. For example, with Top Gun. There's an urban legend that these films had the sanction, but not only the sanction, but also the support of the Pentagon and all that stuff. And if this was the case, who cares? These films indeed portray the United States as good and as doing exciting things. And this is why we're still talking about them and we still love them. Whereas if there was this cult of moral grayness, as Ayn Rand would say, no one would get excited with them and we would forget them very, 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 very quickly. So,
well, I think we should explain why we like those definitive lines between good and evil, and why we're a little bit more suspicious about those blurred lines, because people today would say, well, you know, the blurry lines are true. This is what happens in life. It really is difficult to make distinctions between the good guys and the bad guys, because the good guys are doing bad things too, and the bad guys are sometimes doing good things. But, you know, we don't go to art, and I consider even 80s film art, to see what's real. We go to art to see what's possible, and we go to immerse ourselves in the ideal, and that's, I think, very good. Now, I just want to play devil's advocate here for a second, and say that there are times when that ideal can mess you up. It can give you a distorted sense of, one, your own relationship to the ideal, and sometimes make that ideal seem further by comparison to the stuff that you are experiencing in your life. And so the naturalistic portrayals of life as morally gray can, maybe paradoxically, make people feel actually like the heroes are a little more accessible to them when they see the flaws in those heroes. I remember reading The Fountainhead and crying at the end, not because Rourke was triumphant, but because I felt pieces of multiple characters in me, including Rourke, and had no idea how to bridge those characters or integrate them in a way that I could be more Rourke and less the others. And there was no real roadmap given to me. You know, you were either, there was a paradoxically a sense of determinism in the characters that, you know, they were what they were. They sort of came fully baked, and I got the sense that the ideal was unattainable, even though in reality, having perfect integrity is not an unattainable goal. But what do you think of that? That sometimes these ideals that we paint for ourselves can actually be a millstone around our necks.
Okay, so indeed, quite often it's not easy to figure out who is the good guy and who is not the good guy, but sometimes it is. So, for example, when you're dealing with Soviet Union, more or less it is clear. Now, of course, if you have a pragmatic view of foreign policy, you can get into blunders like Rambo 3, or the real story behind Rambo 3, which is cheering the Mujahideen. So you have no idea what's happening in Afghanistan, but because the Soviet Union is there, you figure out, okay, whoever the other guys, I'm going to help them. So this indeed is stupid. But the moral clarity to say, look, you are doing something wrong. Now, you might have a backstory, whatever, but hijacking a plane and killing people is wrong. Therefore, you will be destroyed for that. Or think about Dirty Harry or someone like that. You might have a very interesting backstory, but you have kidnapped children, and I'm going to destroy you for that. This is something which I think is very important. Otherwise, let's take it to the extreme. Let's actually not to the extreme, to its logical conclusion. If the terrorist has a point, then why is he bad anyway? And if he's not bad anyway, why should we pursue him? So this is what will lead you to non-judgmentalism. So it's one thing to say, some cases have some good and some bad, but wherever you have spotted that this is bad, you attack the bad. You don't say it's gray, you say it has a mix, but the mix is clear what is good and it's clear what is bad. So think, for example, of Joker, right? So, which is yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I just want to say that a movie that does this rather well is Whiplash. Now, Whiplash shows an uncompromising teacher testing someone to the absolute limits because he wants to find the best there ever was, and he understands that the best there ever was will never give up. Now, that is a beautifully, like, I get goosebumps, watching that movie and seeing what this kid goes through, and the idea that, when Miles Teller's character says at one point, what if Charlie Parker gave up? And he says he wouldn't have.
He would never give up.
Right. Now, that's a great thing to hear, but you also see what it's left in its wake. So there's a hint of complexity when you see that his other student, that of course Parker died young from drugs, and his own student killed himself. And so you do see that, well, there's an incredibly high cost to this approach. And it's certainly not for everyone. And that, to me, is where you get the shade of complexity, which is just a hint, it's a suggestion, it's a shade, while the virtue of overcoming great obstacles and the blood, sweat, and tears it takes to be phenomenal at what you do, to be the greatest of all time, shines through. But you were going to say something about the Joker, which is a very cynical movie.
So first of all, the Joker is a very cynical movie. It portrays. So here's the thing with complexity. Joker does a great job in portraying complexity. And what happens then? He gives completely up any hope of improvement and basically says, well, the world sucks Imagine if the Romanians under Ceausescu, instead of Chuck Norris, they were watching Joker. They would say, screw this. We are very much better off. Okay, we're starving, we're under tyranny, but at least our life doesn't suck that much. And again, it's a great movie. The acting is unbelievable. The music is great. But the message of the movie is beyond depressing. Or take Joker in The Dark Knight Rises. In The Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger Joker. In most of these films, if you think about it, the superstar is the villain. So it's one thing to say that quite often the villain has an interesting backstory. It's very interesting to see how someone becomes a villain. But then when the villain is more interesting than the hero, something is off. Something is happening. Something is there which it shouldn't be there in some way. So it's as if saying that the evil will triumph, that there is no other way but at the end compromise or defeat. Remember the end of The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight says you should put your sins on me. Dark Knight is a bit like Jesus. Put your sins on me. So Gotham has to live with a lie, because otherwise what is to be done? So you watch this film, and then what happens to your moral compass? And the question is this a moral compass that will help you in life? Is it going to help you in life, for example, when you say, well, what could the terrorists do? They didn't have any other chance. And I get this all the time, for example, in Greece about Arafat, the former president of the Palestinian Authority, who's like a national hero in Greece. They tell me, well, Arafat has suffered. Okay, if you give Arafat this sanction, what are you doing forget Israel, what are you doing to the Palestinians? What are you doing to the people you worry about? You tell them you're stuck with this bastard, you're stuck with this horrible person, and you're never going to have a state if your authority is this kind of people. So when this moral ambiguity is not only part of the film and part of that, you need to work a bit your mind on what's happening there, but it becomes the central message, then I think this is soul destructive. And this is not good, again, for how you view life.
Again, here's where objectivists are culturally outside of the loop. I mean, it seems to me that in a lot of narratives, heroes are reactive, and it's the villain that initiates the action. It's the villain that is the passionate pursuer of the values, and the hero is a conservative who seeks to preserve sort of the status quo. That's not the case with objectivists. Objectivists don't think villains are very powerful, and I think we're right. I think we're objectively right. Villainy is anti-life, and it's not powerful. It's weak. It's parasitic. But often that doesn't make for the most interesting storytelling, or at least I don't think Hollywood knows how to turn that into a story. Although I did see something I just reviewed recently called Station 11, in which there are no villains, there are only heroes. There are people who are at first perceived a certain way, but you discover they're actually not what they seem. And it's all about civilization being built upon heroism and hope and love and beauty, the beauty of art especially. But I wanted to push back a little bit on the Joker, because people could see that movie and identify with people, let's say in a communist country where they are oppressed and marginalized by the political class, and see a movie like that and feel an identification with the rage that they can't put their finger on, the sense that they're being held down by something that they have no control over. And it could tap something within them that, pushes them to initiate some form of action. Now, being that the hero himself is psychopathic and confused and marginalized, partly because he has no control over his own life and offers really nothing of value. Now that certainly is very discouraging, but do you think identifying with that kind of marginalization that is shown in the Joker could have some kind of appeal to somebody who is in that same circumstance in another country, say under the thumb of Putin, and spark some form of agita. I think it would be nihilistic and anarchistic, but it would still be action to throw off the oppressor.
Honestly, my answer would be no. I see no way that the Joker film could give you anything except than, okay, this was a great aesthetic creation, which shows you that life is, there's no hope. So there's so many moments where the Joker could do something to turn things around, and he never does. He never really improves. He never really even thinks that improvement is possible. So I think the equivalent of Joker would be, well, we're stuck with Ceausescu. The best thing we can do is, I don't know, tear apart our eyes and destroy ourselves. So that's not to sound like this conservative say everything was better in the 80s. There are great films today, obviously. Talking about the cool music of the 80s film, today we have Hans Zimmer, who has written these brilliant scores, for example, for Superman, I think, obviously for Interstellar, for the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it's his score. But again, this sense of there's a good side and there's a bad side is something that I really like in the 80s film. And put yourself in the shoes of someone who is growing up and who is 7 years old, and seeing these people achieving things, seeing Rambo, for example, being strong, being efficacious. This is something which for me had a huge impact. And I loved buying toy soldiers, fake guns. My mother, who of course card-carrying member of the Communist Party, she was freaking out. She was like, okay, this is American imperialism propaganda. So she tried to discourage me, but it was something that was speaking in my soul. Later, I lost it growing up, but I think sports and action heroes were the two best influences that I had in terms of this idea of hero worshipping, which is big in objectivism, but most importantly, I think it can be super beneficial in people's lives. Because otherwise, what are you looking up to, and where do you get this sense of I can do more, I can be more, I can achieve more, and life can be better than whatever mediocrity it happens to be when you find yourself going nowhere.
It's no surprise to me that you would find action heroes in sports to be sort of defining elements for you, because you can't fool anybody in sports, right? In sports, you're either good or you're not,
Exactly.
And you are constantly measuring yourself against reality, and the idea is always to improve and get better, and that's the standard there. And the action hero is sort of the ideal man or woman is the independent being, a completely independent being who decides to take action for the sake of justice, to fight evil because it's who they are. That is a very profound image to send kids. But Rambo is an interesting character, man, because I think the Rambos didn't start in the 80s, did they? They started in the late 70s. I want to say.
And the book was written in the mid 70s. Yeah.
When we were still dealing with the phenomenon of Vietnam and how we felt about it. And certainly the country was cynical, and the men who came back from there became cynical because of the way they were treated and what they experienced over there. So Rambo is an interesting sort of dark figure in a sense. He fights injustice, the sheriff of this bad sheriff of this town, this sadistic sheriff, but it's he's sort of pushed to it, and it's more and there's this element, I guess, that played off the mystique of the Vietnam veteran, as if Vietnam veterans themselves were not normal people who were drafted into the war, had to go to this thing, but were these fantastically honed killing machines, weapons that, could just be turned on, by when their PTSD hit, that switch would turn on and they become these fantastic killing machines. That's still sort of, I don't know, that's sort of verging into the dark side for me. You know what I mean? Not purely heroic.
But here's the thing. Remember Rambo 2. Very soon he realized he's been framed, not really framed, but he's sent to a suicide mission. But once he's there, there's no question who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. The Viet Congs are bad. Our bureaucrats who send me there, they're bad. I'm going to deal with them when I'm back. But here, there's no question that all these Viet Congs are bad and are torturing our people. Of course, we shouldn't be there. Rambo knows that, and it becomes clear. But you have POWs that are being tortured, and you have a regime which has killed, perhaps, according to some accounts, more people in times of peace than they were killed in times of war. So there's no question then who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. Not only killed, but also displaced and all that stuff. So it's not that because the war is a mistake. Well, who can say if the North Vietnamese are the good guys? But let's go to the super chats because we have many. So Maria asks, most importantly, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? So the surprising statement, my hot take of this week is that I haven't watched Die Hard since 92 or something. So for some reason, it's a film that I've never really, I don't know. So
it takes place during a Christmas office party. So yes, it's a Christmas movie.
But if I consider La La Land a Christmas movie, then probably I would also consider Die Hard a Christmas movie. So maybe here's a Christmas resolution. I should watch Die Hard again after 30 years or something like that. So Ali says, and thank you for your super chat, Maria. Ali says, Mark, my husband, watched your movie No Holds Barred many times when it came out, and he found out you were Randy. Can you tell us something moral/funny about that action movie from your earlier 80s movies? Thank you very much, Ali. So the question, Mark, is if you can give us some background or any stuff from your earlier 80s.
Thank you for reminding the world that I did that movie, which I would prefer to forget. Yeah, I mean, that movie is also, well, it was done in the 80s, and very clear lines between who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. My brother, played by Hulk Hogan, represents the good wrestler, and Zeus, played by Tiny Naylor, is this sort of raised up corporate entity who doesn't mind killing people to get where he wants. And his handlers, the corporate guys, aren't averse to, killing people to get what they want either. So my brother Hulk Hogan rises up against all of that and fights it, and eventually wins. But the most interesting thing about that film is Kurt Fuller's in it, who was in Supernatural with me, and Thomas Wright directed that movie, who ended up directing some of the best episodes of Supernatural ever. So there's that connection.
Good.
Otherwise, let's pretend the movie didn't happen.
So thank you, Ali, for your question and your contribution. Many thanks to Marilyn, many thanks to Bonnie, and to Regina, and to Joehamian. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but thank you very much. Your contributions are very much appreciated. Talk about contributions. So because the channel is doing quite well, we have there has been a feature that has been activated called Super Thanks. So apparently this is like super chats, but you can do them after the show. So if you watch a past show and you're too excited about it, and you say, I wish I could show my support while the show was on, now you can do it even for past shows. So here's an idea. Go to every past episode we've ever done, watch them again, and maybe contribute a super thank. And so super chat while the show is live, super thanks while the show is off. I don't know if it can, in retrospect, apply, let's say, even for episode 1. But anyway, it's a good feature, and it's a feature that's going to help us even more. Oh, and then these super thanks, our producer tells us, stay on the video so all the people can see it, so all the people can see that you appreciate us and that we appreciate your support a lot. Okay, what else do we have? 9 o'clock today, 9 o'clock UK time, HBTV with Harry Binswanger, and the topic is why Ayn Rand would have predicted Russia's failure in Ukraine. This is one of the most difficult pills to swallow for me when I was reading Ayn Rand, her theory and her idea that evil is impotent, that Soviet Union was not this super powerful force to be feared. Now we see in action that Russia is not this power which is invincible and we should be afraid of it. And let's see what Harry has to say in around, what time is it now in the UK? In 2.5 hours in HBTV. And thank you very much again, Ali. And we're very grateful and thankful for your contributions. Okay, this is all. Thank you very much, Mark. Actually, before we end, top 3 80s films.
I would say probably Die Hard, Aliens, and Beverly Hills Cop.
Okay, I will stick to action movies. So Top Gun, Predator.
Oh, I was doing the 80s films. So, but if we're going there, it's got to be like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Back to the Future has got to be in there. Fast Time at Ridgemont High. Do you know that one?
Not really.
All right, you got to see Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's amazing. You got to see Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Those are great. Oh, or The Breakfast Club. Come on, man. These are great 80s.
Oh, films. I know The Breakfast Club. Yeah, I've watched it. I wasn't super impressed. I like the music. Yeah, I never got into it. I don't know. I was in a weird mood. So
Say Anything. Come on. There's a bunch of great ones out there.
Okay, we can do also one for 90 films that I will be more familiar. Okay, so thank you, Mark. Thanks everyone for watching. Particular thank you to the contributors. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Peace.